Hey everyone, I'm Lucy.
And I'm Tamoor.
And we're here to review the second season of Netflix's Altered Carbon.
But before we do that, quick reminder, go ahead and watch Altered Carbon Season 2 before you watch this, because obviously,
spoilers
we're going to
ahead.
spoiler it, so you have been warned.
So the plot of Season 2 is kind of similar to Season 1. A far-flung future where all of human consciousness can be downloaded onto a USB stack. Which means that for the super rich who can afford to clone and back themselves up, it means that they can never die. They have cheated death, they have immortality, whereas the poor, there's a lot more rules involved, and so Altered Carbon does take some time. It spent more time in Season 1 exploring that. The other thing they explored was like, when mankind no longer fears death, are you truly man at all?
Are you alive if you cannot die?
Which is the whole point of the envoys led by Chris Falconer, who think that it is an affront to humanity that they can't die, and fearing death is what makes us human.
Yeah.
And so Season 2 is way more focused on Kel. She plays a much bigger role, and also Takeshi Kovacs. So Season 1 was Joel Kinnaman, Season 2, Anthony Mackie, his relationship with her. And of course, you know, there's a meth who can't die, like one of those super rich people. They get murdered, and that sparks off the whole thing.
It's does have those similar beats like you mentioned, but it's also very much a more personal story for Takeshi and Kel.
Just call it Kel.
Kel, but that is both to its detriment and to its benefit in a lot of ways.
I would say
mostly to its detriment. I think the benefit is it allows it to be more focused and less overwhelming later on.
Yeah.
The upfront is very, very heavy-handed. But there's also a bunch of subplots that we won't dig too far deep into, but stuff like, you know, the struggle for Harlan's world, which is a planet where it exists on. You know, Governor Harlan, who's the daughter of Season 1's Governor Harlan, is now in charge. And there's the Protectorate, which is kind of like the group that Takeshi used to work for before he became a freedom fighter. And they're like power struggle over that planet, which is where the resources for stacks kind of gathered from. And then there's various other supporting characters who have their own arcs in different ways. That's Poe, a new character called Trep. And it's all like, how does it come together? And
Aliens is how it comes together. That's the other big thing that Season 2 digs into that was kind of just mentioned in Season 1, in that the technology to enable to download your consciousness onto a DHF, digital human freight, was actually from this race called the Elders, and there's a sort of sneak peek of, it's the one that Danica Harlan has up in her office. It's that kind of fossilized winged guy. Before we dig into what we didn't like about Altered Carbon Season 2, because I mean, unfortunately, we both really loved Season 1. Season 2, to its detriment, as Tam was saying, is focused around the Takeshi-Kel relationship, and kind of leaves all the stuff that made Season 1 so good and so interesting and so compelling a bit by the wayside. But before we dig into that, let's talk about the good. What we liked about Altered Carbon Season 2. So, first of all, the world is still super great, and I really like the fact that we are no longer in Bay City, sort of old San Francisco, and that it takes place pretty much solely on Harlan's world, which is a cool place to explore and see more of, because it's where everything started. Yeah,
exactly. And there is some exploration of that city, but it kind of relies on a lot of your love or understanding of what was laid out in Season 1 to kind of carry it forward. There's not much in-depth new stuff being explored. The concepts that they lay out in the first season are very much running throughout this. It doesn't do much beyond that. So in a way, it's a lot of like wasted potential.
Yeah, the things that I really enjoyed about Season 1 was exploring the disparity between the super rich and the poor, but as well the fact that the themes that they explored were the longer you live, the more detached you become from your humanity. And that's why having the meths as the Season 1 antagonists, and you know, they were there behind the scenes controlling everything, and there were many of them, each doing their own thing solely for themselves. You had all the Bancroft family, and you had Raylene and everyone. That was super interesting, because at the same time, on the flip, you had AI who are bonded to humans, who all they want to do is serve and be helpful. And so in a way, AI are more human than humans because humans have ruined themselves with stacks. Exploring that was super cool. The things that humans would do to each other. So things like the VR torture in season 1, super cool, like awful, but really cool concept to explore, very dystopian. So in season 2, I was kind of disappointed that more of that wasn't explored. You know, there was a lot of mirroring, actually. So like, instead of the VR torture, you had like an AR projecting your faces of your loved ones onto people who were then trying to beat you up. So they kind of had a lot of the groundwork from season 1. It's still there. So the world is still great. Yeah,
it's still great. It's just, it feels less, not explored, but like dug into. Yeah. It's kind of like like we said before, they're relying on you loving the world already or being interested in the world. There's not much beyond what's immediately pertinent to the plot that's explored. If it's relevant to what's happening or what will happen, they'll explore it. Otherwise, it's just kind of thrown away. Whereas in the first season, it was almost like it would pick things to kind of just intrigue you and then just leave it there.
Yeah.
So there's much less of that, but the world is still cool fundamentally.
And like character-wise, I obviously missed Kristen Ortega. She was a great staple of season 1, but I did really like Trep. I thought her backstory was super cool. The stuff with her wife and her kid. I thought they did a really great job of characterizing them and giving them like way more characterization than I expected. Like the kid being really afraid of fireworks because he previously had been in a sleeve that had been blown up. And you know he was afraid, and you know the wife being an archaeologue. And actually proving useful. That's another thing they did a great job of in season 1, is that everyone was pretty integral to the plot. I really liked Trep. I thought she was badass. I love the way that she was just a realist.
Yeah, and clear like motivations, and they're like quite simple motivations. Like they don't beat you over the head with it straight away. It's a motivation that slowly becomes apparent as you learn more about Trep, and by learning more about her, the things that are important to her, namely her family, her kind of whole existence as this kind of bounty hunter is tied up in her family, her son and her wife and
her brother.
And that's an ongoing kind of like search for meaning for her as well. But it's they flesh that character out, like where her arc starts and where it ends is probably the most consistent and satisfying part of season 2, I reckon.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what else I really loved was the Carrera. First of all, I liked that Kovacs wasn't just this super-powered guy, and that he had an actual full equal. Not only did he have an equal, but he's actually Jaeger, his old captain from his past, who ultimately betrayed him, betrayed his family, and was always on the heels of him. And so I really loved that switch. And I also think Carrera's motivation was also excellent, because he'd spent hundreds of years only getting spun back up to be a part of war. He would take down civilizations. He'd take down. He took down the envoys. That was all him, and yet he had zero recognition. Like no one knew his name, and so him just kind of on the surface wanting to serve the Protectorate, but underneath you can tell that he still has that ego. That was super cool. I really enjoyed that.
And it tied like his character as another supporting character who's got a most interesting arc is like. It ties into the kind of the journey that Takeshi has had. Takeshi being and Kovacs being his legacy was the main driving force between everything he's done. The reason why he's so bitter about Kovacs is because he left and to join the envoys and join Kel, and everyone knows him, and he put everything he had into training Kovacs so that he could be the next him. So for Carrera, Kovacs was his legacy, and that's why he's so doggedly chasing him this time. And it's kind of sad, and towards the end of the season you start to see that a bit more with the introduction of a second Kovacs.
Oh, let's get onto that in a minute.
But like you see more of that, and you start to understand why. It's like he doesn't hate Kovacs, he hates the fact that he's lost his legacy because Kovacs discovered something more important to fight for. And that's a interesting humanizing kind of arc or an anchor for that character in a world that's kind of futuristic and about these weird conglomerates fighting people and, you know, weird tech and demons at some point. But that was a good thing to kind of hold on to carry you throughout.
Another thing I really liked about season 2 is I thought the choreography and the fight scenes was really good. I think this is something they totally nailed in season 1, but I thought they had some incredible fight scenes in season 2. The circle, like every punch felt like it had weight, and I just think you want that groundedness, you want that realism as much as you can get it in a show like this where everyone is basically can be a superhuman if you've got enough money. So I thought that was super cool. The bit when they were fighting in the construct at the end where it sort of looked like a scanner darkly.
Yeah.
I also really enjoyed that.
That was good. The actual set pieces, I think, they pretty much define this season for me.
Yeah.
Like I described, every time I speak to someone about this season, I kind of characterize it as less Blade Runner, more Matrix.
Yeah, that's
and
fair.
that's what kind of this season feels like. It's narrowed its scope away from the narrative, the characterization, the world, to kind of place action at the center. And that action is done really well. But it is very much like in the moment it's cool, and then you're like, but why?
But why are you fighting?
But why?
And why are you doing XYZ?
And it's weird because like even his special ability is now designed around action. He's got the worst special ability of all time. I imagine like his special ability is.
What's my special ability?
Well, it's that with guns.
With guns.
But like Anthony Mackie's ability, Takeshi's new sleeve is has the ability to magnetically bring guns to him.
Magneto.
He's like cut price Magneto. But like every time it happens, and it's not that many times surprisingly.
Yeah,
if that was me,
I'd be like,
I would be grabbing guns left, right, and center like constantly, and he just does it maybe 2 or 3 times, and he's surprised every time he does it. He's like, oh god, I've got guns. What do I do with these? But the action sequences were good, but in those moments, I found myself thinking back to the sequences from the first season, and I was like, there's not that many in season 1. There's a few big ones, but like loads of smaller skirmishes, maybe a couple of gunfights. And I think that speaks to like the characterization as well. Like season 1, Joel Kinnaman, Takeshi Kovacs, I prefer way more because he's just like a gumshoe detective stuck in the future almost. And the envoy stuff, like they emphasize his ability to perceive and understand and deduce as much as is like.
Well, because it's a detective.
Yeah, that's what an envoy is. Whereas they don't remind you of that. They talk about envoy's intuition a couple times, but it's usually to set up some shagging scene or something like that. And it's like, all right, we get it. You're using your envoy abilities. Like envoy abilities are boiled down to can punch hard, can run fast, can shoot guns good. In this, which kind of says it all about the season. We're supposed to be talking about the positives here. I know, but... So, I mean, a positive for me is Poe. Poe was a shining light in season 1 anyway, but in season 2, he's great, and he's kind of the emotional heart of the series. I mean, I know that it's meant to be about the relationship between Cal and Kovacs, but I didn't really care for that. I did care about Poe because in season 1, you know, he is an AI programmed to help humanity, and the reason the AI hotels are failing is because the AIs become too attached. Yeah. And Poe is that to a huge degree, in that he just really cares for people, wants to help. In season 1, he was doing psychosurgery on Lizzie. In season 2, she's essentially a ghost that he can't really let go of, even though they don't really see each other anymore. Ghost in the machine in the machine. Yeah. Ghost in the shell in the shell. And so I thought the character of Dig was pretty pointless and just basically a mirror of Lizzie, in that it's someone that he just wants to look after. Yeah. But actually also the relationship between him and Kovacs really annoyed me this season because Kovacs was, I felt like airing too far. He went too far. Like I get that like you're gonna get me killed is the one time that he sort of has a justification for why he's being such a dick, but it doesn't make a lot of sense at all. But given what Poe's his momentary glitches, which are a result of him kind of like not willing to reset himself and lose a lot of memories to kind of create a perfect, working version of himself, are brief and fleeting. Can I raise a plot hole? Yep. So the end of the series, right? It's Poe has made a full copy of Kovacs, okay? Why is it easier for him to make a copy of a human than it is for him to make a copy of himself and put it somewhere else? Yeah, and then like just restore himself off that back. It felt like an unnecessary plot point. However, positives. He didn't have to go that hard. It's like episode 7 or 8 where he has that super emotional scene, and I was like,
Poe doesn't have to go this hard, and yet he did. He was great.
Yeah, he's kind of he's the most charismatic character in this series, this season so far. Like everyone else is kind of dour and kind of annoying. Like Kovac's motivations are rubbish. Kel's just the most like wet blanket of a leader that ever existed. Trep is probably the supporting character that who's worth paying attention to. But Poe's like fun. He's trying his best. He's levity. Yeah, he's like grappling with issues of his own, but also doing his best to kind of play a good part in what's happening and be a crucial piece in the puzzle. But I guess like his arc is almost the same as it is in the first season.
Yeah, he's just looking.
It's pretty much. I mean, like he went from helping others to needing to admit he needs help. But like it's thin. It's not done in any meaningful way. Like Dig comes along and is like, "You should look after yourself, Poe." And he goes, "Maybe I should look after myself," but doesn't actually do it. But let me look after you first. And then eventually he gets to the point where he's like, "All right, I should fix up and look sharp." But
nice.
It's just like he's there mainly to break up the pace and like injects a little bit of levity and energy into the series, to the season, which I'm thankful for. But ultimately, again, a very thin presence from him. I
like the bit where he went to the Renouncers. I think the Renouncers, actually, speaking of cool like world building that we didn't really see much of in season 1, the Renouncers, literally renouncing your body and just living in VR. That's a cool idea. Cool idea, and I'm glad we got to explore that further. Also, Gator from Battlestar Galactica.
It was there.
My man, there he is.
Bring him back.
Bring back Battlestar. It feels very weird that was the good section, because I felt like we started off positive and then just sort of went, which is actually my experience with this season as a whole, and that I really liked the opening. And actually, I don't know how everyone else feels about this, but when the season starts, I had to put subtitles on, first of all, because it pulls no punches with throwing you back into that world. Altered Carbon Season 2 fully expects you to have just finished watching Season 1 and you are up to date on all your terminology, all your characters, remembering who's in what sleeve and who's in VR and whatever.
Hit up Google, search for GameSpot and then the terms Altered Carbon Terminology or Glossary, and we've got you covered, it's fine.
Yeah, so I actually really enjoy that. I love worlds like that. It's kind of like Dune-esque, where it throws you in and it's like, this is the world, you adapt, we're not going to explain this to you. So I really like that, and I think the first episode is the strongest, or one of the strongest for me, the early ones, because you're still establishing and you're finding your feet in the world again, and you're trying to figure out what's going wrong, what position Kovacs is in, and it mirrors a lot of season 1 in that he's not a fish out of water, but like he's been defrosted, he's put back, and he's set straight to work. But then unfortunately, like, all the cool stuff that I want to know more about, so the coup, Danica Harlem, the Japanese family that he's involved with.
Who he served for a little while.
And I was like, that's really cool. And
that was that scene was great. The tension between his old, someone who he used to work with, who was he calls him Oyabun, which is basically, what you would call a Yakuza leader, or father figure, or your boss, it means basically. But you don't get to see that story at all, and his son is the actual blood relative son is there, who are you?
Oh, great grandson.
Great grandson. And there's some tension between Kovacs and him, because it looks like Kovacs is back to kind of muscle in on territory, but there's a good tension in that scene, but it doesn't really come back. That character, Oyabun, comes back to serve a purpose, to get their plot moving and resolved, but sadly there's not much more. He serves the role of wise guide, careful what you do, careful how many times you re-sleeve, you lose yourself a little bit every time. It's all right, we knew that, we didn't really need a character to tell us that.
But in season 2, the main conceit is the relationship between Kel and Kovacs, and
do not care.
I don't think it's earned. There are a lot of things in that relationship that really annoyed me, in that, there's parts towards the end where, he's chased her, he's killed hundreds, thousands of people for her, and likewise, they have done everything, they've sacrificed everything to be with each other. And then she says, I'm going to trap the elder into myself and then I'm going to kill myself. And she's fine with it. And she's trying not to tell him that that's her plan. And she's like totally straight-faced and just fine with it. And then and that would be real death for her because she doesn't believe in backing up. But then when he does it, when he, makes his other self restrain her and he gets the elder in his stack and calls down the angel fire, she's absolutely distraught. Whereas 20 minutes prior, she was like, no problem. This is the end. Goodbye. We're bad for each other. Don't care. And that really frustrated me. And also, like, the whole point of Kel is that she's this fierce military leader. So putting her in this amnesic position was super like frustrating because everyone is like drawn to her, but you don't. The only way you really understand it is if like in season 1, she's the thing inside his head, and he's obsessed with her. But
they have like flashbacks to their early days in season 1 where you're like, okay, I can see that there's at least a relationship there. But then in the modern, like, or futuristic modern times where the story is actually set, it's just like there need to be more reminders. Like every time you see her, she's like either doing because she's also like for a long period, she's being controlled by this one elder. We haven't mentioned this bit, but like she's being controlled by an elder who was on the planet when Harlan discovered it with the lads. With the lads. Harlan and the lads found the technology and were like, well, we're gonna kill all the natural living creatures here, and that's it. And then that one elder god remained and transferred into Kel, and is now taking her revenge by killing off all the founding members of Harlan's world, which is like dry.
You think it's right? So I don't mind that. I don't mind it, but there are things about that I didn't like. In that, why did it look like the Upside Down from Stranger Things?
I looked at it and I was like, that's what made it dry. It was like in a world of technology and futurism and like moral quandaries, is a big old dragon. And it's just like, you can do better than that. Like, at least make that contrast in like almost fantasy and sci-fi like a little more interesting. Make it a neon dragon. Make it a dragon made of ones and zeros. Anything. Like, just a straight up dragon. You're like, this is just lazy. Come on.
But at the same time, so Kel being this cool military leader, you don't get that until episode 7. And so it's very weird because you see her as this badass fighter who takes out rooms full of elite guards, but who's also an amnesiac. And then it's not until episode 7 you get the real Kel, who also discovers herself from some water. That was weird, me. That was weird, that annoyed me. But
it's like she's like, I wash my face, I remember everything.
It's like me in the morning.
Yeah, this is great, this was amazing.
But, so I just feel like they should have done a better job at characterizing her up front in the season. It didn't feel earned, and I just feel like that's who becomes that obsessed with someone that you would do all of this and
see, like I hate to go back to it, but like there was a moment in season 2 early on where they're doing the circle and Ortega showed up, and that immediately I was like, you two, like, you've got a strong relationship. Like, they went through some stuff in season 1. Like, that bond is way stronger, and it felt way more impactful when Ortega showed up for a brief period of time than the entirety of everything Kel's done in season 1 and season 2. Like, I know that I'm not the writer of this, but like, the story between Ortega and Takeshi, or like even Takeshi and Trep, is way more interesting to me. I think Kel's just like, more and more she started to feel like this red herring MacGuffin character just to move the plot around.
Actually, in season 1 too, like the big flashback episode wasn't until episode 7 or something, wasn't it? It was like later on in the season, and it just doesn't feel. It doesn't feel strong enough to pull the whole season along.
Yeah,
and
it's just sad.
Yeah, I just. Meh. But at the same time, Kovacs, I think we both preferred
I like Joel Kinnaman, yeah.
Which is...
I know a lot of people hate Joel Kinnaman.
But I think he was great
I think he was great. He had that, like, visually and also the way he conducted himself, that gumshoe style thing that we mentioned, like the cop part of it, he did really well. And like that gruff, like, and when Anthony Mackie tries to be like brooding, it just doesn't work for me at all.
So I really like Anthony Mackie, but I and I'm sure this is like no fault of his own, but maybe I just associate him too much with Falcon, and I find him like
on your left.
His resting bitch face isn't as good as Joel Kinnaman's. Like, I think he still does a good job with what he has, but he brings a softness to it that I don't think Takeshi Kovacs as a character has in any regard. Like, he has, even in season 1 when Joel Kinnaman was, you know, like in a moment of letting his guard down and spending time with Ortega or spending time with Kel, it's like there was still a wall up there, and I think that Anthony Mackie was maybe a little too, I don't know, he did the best with what he could, with what he had.
He was like, okay, he's clearly a character or someone they cast for a role as an action hero more than someone with range who's going to be a cop, an investigator, and an action hero.
But I think, so the other part we haven't really talked about is the double sleeving, and that you have Kovacs, who's been through everything, has been through all the events of season 1, and then you have Kovacs Prime.
Kovacs Prime, as the subtitles say.
That's the subtitles say, Kovacs Prime, who has been basically in VR for 300 years. And so you get this cool, I actually kind of like that.
When that reveal happened, I was like, all right, it's about to get good.
It's about to get Gemini Man. Or Looper.
Yeah, but like that
like
just
Looper.
It didn't go anywhere interesting. Like very quickly they show you that they're going to turn that, because the whole idea is Kovacs Prime is a clone created by Carrera to like bring out when stuff is getting real rough, because he was the best soldier they had. So when they need to catch other Kovacs, they bring out the clone, which is a great way to be like, we're gonna really mess with him. But very quickly you can see, the whole point is to turn him into a good guy. And it happens so fast, and you're like, you didn't explore the interesting opportunities at all. You had him they have him kill off a couple of characters, Trep's dad being one of them, but it's like, hey, this is Trep's dad. Trep's dad's dead now. All right.
Yeah.
Okay,
also,
great.
I mean, did you find it weird that when they were being held by Kemp, and they were just like, there was a metal railing and both of them were just sort of sat like that. I was like,
you can rip through that. You can
that.
bring guns to your hands, guys.
Yeah, it was.
It's just not. Yeah, it's just like, and the Kovacs Prime stuff. Like by the end of it, I was like, oh, so what you've done is you've created a season 3. Kind of like hook. That was the only reason to have this character, and that's what it left me with. Instead of being like, oh, you brought this character into this story for this reason, and it led to X, Y, and Z happening within the narrative or the characterization. I forgot all of that, and I just remember it as like, all right, it's trying to set up another season here.
I'm trying not to be too negative, because like at the same time, I have all these issues with it, but I watched the whole thing.
Yeah.
And like, I really love the world, and I love a lot of those actors. I love a lot of the concepts. I love cyberpunk, I love hard sci-fi, so there was just things that annoyed me. I mean, there were some moments where the writing just, I was texting with Mike Rougeau, our entertainment editor, and the bit where he says, we don't have weapons. We are the weapons.
And my brain just cut to that trailer for, I think it's called
It's Prey.
No, there's
You are the weapon.
You are the weapon.
That's Prey.
Yeah, I think it was that. Also, I think it happens in the movie trailer for the movie Lucy, which is quite funny.
Yeah, it does.
It's like, you are the weapon, and you're like, oh God, what is happening? And then, have you heard of the circle? And it's like, no, but I bet it's round. And you're like, oh, come on, what is going on?
When will you love me enough to live?
Oh Lord, it's like full of bad lines. And I think the dialogue is not great throughout. Like and it's delivered. It starts very, very quickly in season 1. I started hearing the way they were just waiting for their cues to speak instead of naturally delivering dialogue. So it was like someone would finish saying something and then the other person would immediately pick up with a line read, not a response to what was being said.
Acting is reacting.
Acting is reacting, yeah. And it felt very unnatural, and I was like, I just didn't like the dialogue like became very stilted and the performance became very stilted. But like you said, I think the reason we can't get off of how negative we are about it is because we really loved season 1 and we expected way more of season 2. And I think if you don't expect as much as perhaps other people, like people like us might have, you actually can have a good time with this. Like it is a like I said, The Matrix. Not as good as Matrix, but like that kind of like cool action sequence kind of show where things keep moving at a quick clip. If you don't think too hard of it, it's fine.
The thing that is weird about it is that it's not just a show that you can switch off and just enjoy the action set pieces, because it requires a lot of mental investment in you, because you have to remember what all these things are, what they do, who this person is, where they are in the story. Have they been on ice for years? Have they been spun up? Whose body are they in? And so it's a very weird disconnect in that the show forces you to pay more attention, and unfortunately when you pay more attention you see where it doesn't, I hate myself, but stack up.
Yeah, very good. I respect it.
And so yeah, the ending is obviously set up for season 3, unless it gets hit by the Netflix curse of not being renewed for a 3rd season.
Takeshi
I'm looking
Kovacs.
at you. I'm looking at you, Mindhunter. I'm very, very sad about that. But there's a lot of cool stuff in there. I think costume design, still incredible. I think in terms of visual effects, it's cool. It's super stylized. It fully immerses you into that world. Plot-wise, writing-wise, doesn't really do it for me, and I don't like to be negative about things. I like championing things when I can, and I still think Altered Carbon is a super cool piece of sci-fi.
Season 1 is fantastic. If you've not seen season 1 and somehow you're here, firstly, how? Secondly, season 1 is genuinely great. Recommend season 1 to people. Like, read the books. Not as great, but still.
Well, this is book 2 and 3
this is book 2 and 3
mashed
combined,
together.
yeah. And
so it's actually like, if they do a season 3, they're on their own.
Yeah. But it is like, it's there if you want it. That's the best you can say.
Yeah. All right, that was our review of Altered Carbon season 2. Didn't love it as much as season 1, unfortunately, but there is actually a graphic novel out now that I'm interested in reading.
Oh, I'd read that.
I actually might. I upgraded to the Netflix 4K package, and I actually have a TV that's good enough, so I might go back and enjoy season 1 in crisp 4K.
4K.
UHD.
It's good. Joel Kinnaman's hair looks phenomenal.
It does. It really does. Yeah. Also, he has an incredible jacket that I really enjoy.
That jacket is really, doesn't have a good jacket. Anthony Mackie shirtless, a lot of it, which is great in its own way, but cool
butt?
jacket. You can see Anthony's Mackie. That doesn't make sense.
That's terrible. Let's move on. All right. For more about Altered Carbon, make sure to stay tuned to GameSpot. We've got a bunch of like glossary terms and interviews with the showrunner and some of the actors up on GameSpot.com. For more on GameSpot Universe, we've got American Horror Story, Picard breakdowns.
Loads of breakdowns.
So subscribe, stick around. If you want to find Utam, where can you find you?
@TamoorH on Twitter.
And I'm at Lucy James Games. See you next time.
Bye.